Tonight we are at step 4, in which we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We started out and we did the first part of the inventory last week, and maybe this week we can go through the other 2 sections of the inventory. And to get down, each week we do a slight review, and tonight we will do a review. We start out with what is the problem, and that is the first step to recovery. This is the first information that we gather in solving a problem. What is the problem? We're talking about solving the problem of alcoholism. And as we go through the first step, we find that the problem is that we are powerless. Powerless. And it explains in the doctor's opinion in the front of our big book that we're powerless over alcohol in our lives that become unmanageable. And the doctor's opinion explains for the first time the real nature, exact nature of the problem. It says we have a twofold problem. We have a physical problem. It is a disease, number 1. And this is disease that affects the body and the mind. You know, most illnesses affect the body or the mind. And alcoholism, he said, is any discussion of this which leaves out the physical factor is incomplete, because I'm sure in this case the body is sickened as well as the mind. And he talks about this physical part of our illness as a physical allergy. We are abnormal drinkers. We are abnormal when it comes to the drug alcohol. And I knew it was something wrong with me, but I didn't know I was an abnormal drinker. And I drank alcohol for 16 years, and I didn't know that I was drinking abnormally, because the way I drank was normal for me. You know, I drank one way. I took a drink and wanted another drink. Every time I took a drink, I experienced this craving, and it was normal for me to experience this. So I didn't know that I was abnormal. And I drank with a lot of other abnormal drinkers that drank like me. But I found out when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous that I was an abnormal drinker. When I took a drink of alcohol, something occurred in me that did not occur in the average temperate drinker. When I took a drink of alcohol, I experienced a physical craving for another drink. And this craving would make me reach for another drink. And the more I drank, the more I would crave. And I would continue to build and continue to drink, and alcohol would almost every time I drank, I had some minor or some kind of problem in my life. My life became unmanageable. So I found out when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous that I was abnormal. And Dr. Silkworth went on further with this. He said there's no known treatment for this, except the only thing we can just suggest is total abstinence. If you don't take the first drink, you won't have that problem. Now that was too simple for me. You know what I mean? I wanted something more complicated. If you don't take the first drink, you will never experience the craving of alcohol. But that was just part of my problem. My main problem was in the mind. My main problem was this mental obsession. The idea that overcame all other ideas. When I did drink, I had an obsession. I had a lot of things that go on in my life. The doctor said that I was restless and irritable and discontent. And I could add some long list of a lot of things. I was lonely. And I was full of self-pity, you know, remorse and guilt of things that I'd done in the past. And these things would eat at me constantly. And then finally, at a certain point, you know, I would remember the sense of ease and comfort. I remember how great I could take a few drinks and these things would go away. I would remember that. And then I would say, oh no, but I can't drink because I got in trouble the last time. But your mind said, oh, but it make you feel so good. And the sense of ease and comfort would overcome all the ideas that I couldn't drink. The idea that I could drink would overcome the idea that I couldn't. And I would reach over. This obsession would make me take a few drinks. And as soon as I took a few drinks, those few drinks would trigger the craving in my body. And the craving would make me take another drink and another drink. And I would go through the well-known spree, and I'd get in a lot of trouble. As soon as I got out of trouble, I would go around for a few days, a few weeks, And I say, I'm through with that stuff. And this thing would build up again. The obsession would be triggered again, and I would reach over and take a few drinks. So this vicious cycle was setting, and I was really, I was in a trap, and I really didn't know the exact nature of the trap I was in. And I think I'm very blessed as an alcoholic, because most alcoholics will die or become a victim of the disease of alcoholism before they even realize what's going on in their lives. But once we see this, that we are powerless, then the second step talks about a solution. There is a solution to this problem. And quite obvious, if your problem is powerless, it's from this first step that we extract the second step. This is why we have to have the first step. We have to have the information of the first step in order to find the second step. If your problem is powerless, then your solution will come from over here. Your solution will be power, obviously. And since we don't know anything about the physical allergy to alcohol, then the power would have to probably work within the mind. And he talks about if this power, by the use of this power, if we could bring about some personality changes, fishing to recover. We wouldn't restless, nervous, and discontent. We wouldn't feel full of guilt and remorse and shame all the time. Then we would never have to remember the sense of ease and comfort that would come at once by taking a few drinks. Therefore, we would never take the first drink. And if we never took the first drink, we would never set off the physical craving in our bodies. So we believe that the solution is in the mind. Therefore, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. We can become whole, what sanity means. Now, if this is a problem and this is the solution, then the main purpose, the main proposition here then is obvious. If the problem is powerless and the solution is power, then the main thing would be how to find that power. How do we find that power? That's the main purpose of the program. So we have 10 steps, a little 10-step program left. We have steps 3 through 12, which is a plan to find that power. And it never fails. It says, I've never seen anybody that give us these directions or suggestions which we look at. And if we would take these steps, then these steps will produce that power which is within, which will solve the problem. So we began the recovery program, or the process at step 3, when we made a decision. And, as we said, the first 2 steps brought us into step 3. And the step 3 was to decide which of these we wanted. Decision means to cut facts in two. And once we obviously, between the two, we took the power. We made a decision to turn our will and our eyes over the care of this guy as we understand. Now we had to go to work in the next step, step 4, to carry out this decision. And the next step, after step 3, is to find the things within us that block us off from this power. Now we alcoholics are. Our book said we are selfish. We're selfish and self-centered people. What that really means, I guess, we just really screwed up. That's what it really means. We alcoholics, we're full of self. My friend Mel was sharing something last night. I'd have to share this with you. Nothing is original for me. And he was telling me last night, we were talking about this Amish poem. It just really struck me. It sure fits us as alcoholics. And this guy, this old Amish, he was praying to God, and he said something to God, it seems like everything in this world is strange, except me and thee. And sometimes, God, thee a little. I love that. That's the way it looked to me all the time. But as we, what is within us that blocks us off from God? And then, to us, at times we say God doesn't exist. It's seemingly like in the alcoholic's life that there is no God, and God does not exist. Because there's so much within us that totally blocks us from the great creator of this universe. The whole thing will shut off from it by the things that are within us. So this decision, step 3, is just a decision to do this. Now we have to go to work to identify these things that block us off. They're keeping us from carrying out the decision in step 3. And we begin the inventory process as we did last week. And it's very simple if we look at the big book on what the inventory is all about. The inventory is to identify the things within us. And our grosser handicaps is what we're going to start with. The things that block us off from God. God is within each and every human being. And He's going to have to work through our minds and into our lives. And the only way God cannot come into our minds, because our minds are filled with a lot of garbage. God can't direct a mind that's full of resentment, full of fear, full of conflict with other people. But we made this decision. Now we've got to go to work to take an inventory. We're going to look within our minds, that's ourselves, because today I am what I think. In fact, I can be no more than the thoughts that go through my mind. That scares me sometimes, but I can be no more than the thoughts that go through my mind. So and it talks about a stock in trade. We're going to inventory the stock in trade. We're going to inventory me. We're going to inventory our lives. We're going to inventory the thoughts that we try to come through our minds each day. And we're going to fool ourselves about values. And we're going to see which of these things we're going to give away. We're going to get out of the way. We're going to identify the unsaleable items. And we're going to make room. As we remove these things, we're going to make room to carry out this decision. Because when we remove some of these things, then God can come in and occupy that part of our minds and direct our lives. So the first thing we did, we talked about resentments. And this was our number 1 offender. And it said we were to to list all of our resentments. And that was easy enough to do. We alcoholics, we play these things over and over in our minds. We talked about them last week. And the first thing we do, we list a name of people, principles, and institutions that we resent. Just put them all down. And we look at them right now. This is a very simple process. 1, 2, 3, 4. List every person, every institution, every principle we resent. And we go completely down that list. If we have a list, if we want to write it out, if you got 20 or 100 or 50, just put them all down. If you got, just put down their names. Until you completely empty your mind of everybody you resent. And that's simple enough to do. You don't have to be, don't have to be a genius to do this. Anybody can do this inventory process. Then after we get that list filled out, then we come to the second list. And maybe this is the best way to look at it. After we complete this list, then we put in the second column, cause. Why do I resent number 1? And then you go, so you'll go down, put in number 1, and then you go, why do I resent number 2? Why do I resent number 3? Why do I resent number 4? You go down this list from top to bottom, then you go down this list from top to bottom, never going across. Now, it's from the first list, and this is why it was important that we put down all of our resentments. Because once we got all the names down, it's from the names from this column that we extract the second column. See? The second column comes from the first column. The cause comes from the name. And then once we get this column down. Then we put in the third column, kind of running out of space here. Which part of self did the cause strike? Did that person threaten my self-esteem? That's the social instinct. Or did he threaten my security instinct? Or did he threaten my sex life? One of those had to be threatened by what he did in order for me to have a resentment. So it's from the cause, from this column, from the first column, we get the second column. And when we trace the second column, we get the third column. The third column comes from the second column. So one column is giving you the next column. Now this is what we were going to really get down to, because remember we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to care of God as we understood Him. And it says self was the root of our problems. So it's through this process we have found what's within ourselves. You know what I mean? We've gotten down to really to the exact nature of the problem. And then once we get this column, then we go to the fourth column. Which character defect within me actually that caused this? And we will find out, you know, if we will, with honesty, that each resentment, we played a role in it. You know, I have played resentments over and over many times in my life. And I resented people. And I always talked about what they did. And they did do something. But I had replayed that over and over and over so much that I'd never been able to see the truth of it. Because I had rationalized in my mind what they had did over and over to me, and never one time in my life had I ever looked at what I had to do with this. And very honestly, it was astonishing that in each resentment, nowhere did anybody ever come up and do something to me. I had always set the ball rolling, but I had never looked at them. So we go down and we find out, you know, in this case, you know, was it my selfishness? Was it my dishonesty? Something part of my character actually set this ball rolling. And we played a role in each of these resentments. So in this fourth column, we mark what role did I play in this. And we can look at the third column and we can develop the fourth column. So if we have completed this, then we have really listed, not only listed, this is listing our resentments, but these three columns here is analyzing it. We have listed and analyzed each resentment. For the first time, we get the true picture. Now, if I don't get rid of these character defects over here, obviously, you know, these are the things. If I don't get rid of these things are going to always occur. But if I can get rid of these, regardless of what people do, I will not have a resentment. And this is why we talk about being free. Because as long as I'm living with these resentments and having these and living like this, then these people are controlling my life. So if we have done that, we have analyzed, and at this point all the fears that we had, the resentments that we had should be gone. So, you know, we have made a decision to make God the director of our lives. So this area of our minds, He cannot come in and occupy. You know, there's no void. And as we remove these things, then God can direct our minds. God can direct the mind when it's full of resentment. It blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. We're blocked off from God the moment that we have a resentment. But after he finishes resentment on page 67 of our book, he said, notice the word fear, which is bracketed along the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones' employer, and my wife. This short word somehow touches every aspect of our lives, and it does. Fear is a part of our lives. You know, we couldn't live one day without fear. Fear plays a major part in our relationships. It plays a major part in our just being here tonight. You know, there's no way that one of us could survive throughout the day without fear. It takes caution to drive your car, which is a form of fear. It takes fear to cross the street. You know, we have used fear all day long. And fact, none of us could have a great, we couldn't even have a good relationship. Right tonight, if we took fear out of this audience, it would be chaos. For one thing, everybody in here would tell the other one what he thought about it. And that wouldn't be good, would it? That really wouldn't be good, would it? So fear is a part of our lives. I never really understood it. I understood, we men, we are machos. We're not supposed to have it. Now, it's natural now, but you're not supposed to have it. When I was a kid, they told me growing up, I don't know how I was. I got one night probably. They say, you shouldn't be scared of the dark. You're grown now. And now I really got a problem. See, first I was scared of the dark. Now I got another fear. I ain't supposed to have it, so I can't tell them I got it. See? So they really created a problem for me. But it is a part of our lives. It is fear plays a useful role, like resentment. Fear protects us. It produces a caution to slow us down to get into things. Fear is a vital part of our lives up to a certain point, and then it becomes destructive. And nobody's perfect with it. So it's a part of our lives, but then how do we control it? I use the illustration all the time about, I have some negative. Fear is a negative indicator that probably should trigger some actions in you. When a negative indicator goes off, that means you need to take some actions. Just like on your automobile, on my automobile, I have some red lights on the dashboard. And they are negative indicators. And when one of those red lights come on, says the engine is hot, then that means I have to stop and get some water or do something about it to keep from destroying the engine. They really protect the car. And when the negative indicator comes on, there's certain actions that you need to take. Now, but if this negative indicator is out of whack and it's coming on and there's nothing wrong, then that's a problem for you. It's false. It's projecting false things, and you're reacting to something there's nothing to do. And this is what happens to the alcoholic. His red lights just come on all the time. And he drives his car down the street. Now, most people drive the car down the street looking out the windshield. He drives the car down the road looking at the red lights. And we alcoholics, and it's a time in our life we've been driven by these things, and now it's time to stop and list these fears and analyze them and see if they're real. Because we're reacting to them whether they're real or false. They're dominating our lives. For the first time, we're going to look at them and see if they're real. And this is what the process of the inventory is all about. And to do that, we have to get them down on paper. List and analyze them. And so I had to list and analyze these fears. And he tells us exactly in the big book, if we study our book, how to do this. Very simple process in the big book. He said we reviewed our fears and we put them on paper. We put down the things we were fearful of. Just make a list, our fear, the internal revenue and whatever we fear. We fear a lot of things, our boss, other people, institutions, and this lists everything that we fear. And we're not going to try to figure out why. We just put them down, all the fears that we have. And once we complete this, then we have a list of the things, people, persons, and institutions that we fear. Then we come to the next column and we put down the cause. Why do I fear that? And if we don't know, just put down, I don't know. We're going to try to analyze ourselves. So I fear that because my mother set me on the pot back. Which, we're not going to try to psychoanalyze ourselves. Just put down, I don't know. A lot of these fears, we don't know how we got them. Just put them down. That guy said, I fear high places. I said, hell, ain't nothing wrong with that. That's natural. You ain't got no wings. You're supposed to fear high places. Okay, so the next thing we come to the third column. Now this is very revealing. This is why we could self. And we said self is made up of our social instincts. Remember that. Our self-esteem, our personal relationships, our prides, our companionship, which make up our social instincts. Self is made up also of our security instincts, the second column. And they're all S's, by the way. That's very peculiar. Social security, sex, I don't really go. But then our security instincts, materially and emotionally. Now, then we have our sex instinct. Now, in order for us to have a fear, it's real simple. In order for me to have a fear, the fear has to affect one part of self. Does it threaten my self-esteem? Or does it threaten my security, my material security? I have a lot of fear. Or my emotional security? Or does it threaten my sex life? It has to threaten one of these in order for me to have fear. So which part of self was threatened? And we checked the cause and the cause produced, and we put an X in here, whichever part, and sometimes it's a combination. Which part of self was threatened? This is why we have this fear. And then we go to ourselves. Then we come to our character defect, column 4. Which character defect within us it has a play in this fear? Was it dishonesty? A lot of times the things I feared, say I feared the IRS. We all do. Because I cheated on my tax return, right? Which part of a self caused this? Well, material security. I wanted that money. Which character defect was involved? Dishonesty. Okay. So I had this fear all my life. Well, did not I set the ball rolling? If it wasn't for the character defect, I wouldn't have had this. This wouldn't have happened, and then I would have never had the fear. So, didn't I set the ball rolling? I found in most of the fears, the main problem was right over here in the character defect. This was the thing that I had feared all my life. In the same way we said in resentments, there's certain people over here on our resentment list that we resented, and we found out after we saw that our role was involved with dishonesty, we actually owe these people an amends. And the same way about the IRS. Instead of me fearing them, I owe them amends for my dishonesty. And we look at that in a different light. And we'll find out as we go down this list and make this list, we'll find out that most of step 8, a lot of the list on step 8 is going to be the same things with the fears. These are going to be things that we were involved in. It says we reviewed our fears thoroughly, put them on paper. We asked ourselves why we had them. It's the second column. And it wasn't because self-reliance failed us. And so which part of self was involved? And we go through these things and analyze them. And he says, after we have done these things and analyzed these things, we get rid of most of these fears. And then we have fears that seem to stay, just like the resentment, some of those deep-seated resentments. And he tells us how to get rid of those in our book. He says, we trust God. We never apologize for God. We let him demonstrate through us what he can do. And then we have these prayers that stay. He said we pray about them. We asked him to remove our fears and to direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once we commenced to outgrow fear. We hear about the other prayers, the prayers in step 3 and the prayers in step 7. But there's another prayer in step 4. There's a prayer on resentment. There's a prayer on fear. He said if we have fears, we ask God to remove them. And it says at once we will outgrow fear. So we have completed step the first part, the resentment part, and now the fears. We have listed and analyzed our fears. We have analyzed most of them out, and the ones that stay, we prayed and removed them. So at this point in the inventory, we have gotten rid of our resentments, we have gotten rid of our fears, and we're carrying out that decision because we're making room for God to come into our life. Then the final part of our book, he says, the last indicator, he says, how about sex? Well, we love this part. Many of us needed overhauling there. Boy, and I always tell the older fellows, don't get your hopes up. We're not talking about what you think I'm talking about. We're talking about mental, not physical. We can't overhaul there. If we did, we'd have a bigger crowd tonight. Okay. And here people get off into all kind of, if we bring this subject up, golly, in the modern times, we know more about going to the moon than we know about sex. Everybody talks about it, don't know nobody knowing about it. But sex is a basic instinct that God gave man. He gave us a unique sex life. He gave us the ability to think, reason, and use our, something that he didn't give the lower class of animals. The lower class of animals they are really God-directed creatures. They don't really have choices like we do. And God gave them a simple sex life. God controls that when he's ready for them to reproduce, and usually it has to do with the time of year, right? He will have them mate so that as a time takes place, so it will be born at a certain time of year, so the offspring will live in the spring, right? So at a certain time of year, God, the female comes in heat, the male just responds to that, and the sex act is brought on, and they recreate in the spring of the year, and other than that, they have no desire for sex. But God gave us the ability. He gave it to us. He gave man his own ability. He said, I'm going to give you this, man. You're going to have the decisions in this. And this is a great problem. You know what I mean? We get the ability to think about it. That's the trouble. We think about it. And other animals don't. See? And it's how to, and this is a part of every human life. It's one of the strongest drives in a human being. You mean? And my book says, we wouldn't be human if we didn't have sex problems. I did not know that. See, everybody's got sex problems. Even the people that say they don't have them got them. You know? See, I always thought a sex problem was something else different. You know what I mean? I always thought it was a physical thing. When I first come to AA, they said, you got a sex problem. I said, the hell I do. So, but I didn't know what they were talking about. When they explained it to me, I said, oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't know anything about this. Here I am, I thought I knew. I didn't know nothing about it. But the sex is a part of our life. And this instinct is God-given. And it's really, we're not talking about this book is not going to get into our sex life. Really. Not to our sex conduct. It's not going to get into telling us what to do and what not to do. It's not going to give rules. It says it wants us to look at our sex conduct of the past on an individual basis, so that we can formulate. If we look at our past, we can formulate something better in the future. That's all we want to do. And so it begins. It tells us on page 69, we reviewed our sex conduct over the past years. Whom had I hurt? First column, who did I hurt? That's simple enough. Now, we might say, many of us have said, well, I really never did anything wrong sexually. Well, you might not did anything physically wrong sexually, but all of us have aroused, because of the sex instinct probably, have aroused some jealousy, some bitterness, and some suspicion, we have done some of those little things, right? All of us. Every human being. No one's been perfect with this. You know, I usually in a sex, I love to tell about one of my favorite stories about the young man who was going to get married, and he had a problem. They wanted to get married, and he was doing Lent, and he went to the priest, and the priest said, well, I can't marry you, it's doing Lent. And they said, Father, we want to get married bad, real bad. Said, well, I can't marry you unless you make some sort of supreme sacrifice. And they said, well, we'll do anything you say. They were just wanting to get married. He said, well, what kind of sacrifice you want to make? He said, we'll sacrifice anything. And the father said, well, how about sacrificing sex until the end of until Lent? And he said, well, okay. So they volunteered to do that. And finally, a couple of weeks, the father saw him downtown. He was talking to a young man. He said, great, hi, good to see you. And he'd married him, and he was asking about the marriage and how they were doing. And the young man said, oh, we're doing fine, fine. And he says, how's your marriage life? I said, oh, it's beautiful. And he said, how did y'all do on that commitment? Did you keep it? Is everything going all right? The sacrifice, are you doing all right? He said, Father, we had a little problem with that. He said, we were doing fine. Until finally my wife had one of those short mini skirts, and she dropped a can of peas on the floor, and she bent over to pick them up, and he said, I just couldn't go no further. He said, don't you know they're going to put you out of church for that? He said, they put me out of the supermarket. You know. You know, it's no one is immune from this. Okay, so we get these things, we go through this, and we put down who did I hurt, top to bottom, you know, and what we did, you know, whatever we did wrong. Maybe we made somebody but we offended somebody in some way. And we said, we put down the cause, and then we put down which part of self caused us to do that. This is quite revealing. See, we went around with a lot of guilt and shame because of our sex conduct of the past. We feel we're really bad people. You know, for some reason, maybe we feel dirty. And I think we can get free from a lot of this by completing this inventory. We'll put these things down. And then we're going to come back to which part of self caused us to do that. And sometimes, you know, I think if it was a sexual wrong, we'd all assume real quick that it was caused by a sex instinct. You know, very seldom do we go out and do something just because of the sex drive. No, it's not sex. As we list and analyze our sex conduct of the past, we're going to find out that most of our difficulties, the things we done, hurt other people, was not caused by sex. Most of it was caused by our social instincts. You know, we find out, you know, by maybe we're just lonely. See me? Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe we just want companionship. I mean, that's why we did it. Maybe it's our self-esteem. You know, we men, we get the idea, we growed up with the idea the more people of the opposite sex that you can attract, the better, bigger macho guy you are. We build up our ego. It's an ego problem. It ain't a sex problem once we list and analyze it. Sometimes it's caused by emotional security. Caused us to do that. And sometimes material security. Very seldom is it caused by sex. But for the first time, you know, if we list and analyze these things, we get, you know, we find out we're not dirty people. We're not bad people. Come in. I've just been doing this to feel better, feel better about myself. Trying to build up my ego, build up my self-esteem with this sort of thing. And when we do that, you know, we have less desires to do that, and it seems to go away. Now, step 4, if done properly, it is to remove the things that block us off. And as we went through our resentments in this way, listed and analyzed them out. We went through our fears, listed and analyzed them out. And went through our sex conduct of the past, seen the real truth of it, worked our way through these things. Most of these things are gone. You know, step 4 is a powerful removing step. It's a step to begin to remove the things that block us off from God. And it says also that if these things still persist, we pray about them. And if they still persist, he said, gives us the ultimate to, then we work with another alcoholic. That's one thing about work with another alcoholic. It's a kind of automatic process. When one alcoholic gets involved with the life of another alcoholic, it gets him out of self. And God can seem to come in and work into his life. Now, it kind of makes a summary here, and we have done a lot. If we have been through our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. All 3 of these sheets are filled out. And this is what we have listed, and we have listed and analyzed our resentments on the first sheet. And tonight, if we went through fears, we have listed and analyzed our fears. And if we go through the sex conduct of the past, we have listed and analyzed our sex conduct of the past. All 3 of these things. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. If we have analyzed them, we can really comprehend them now. Where our trouble is coming from. Why we are drinking. We have commenced to see their terrible destruction. If we have done it in this depth. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill. You know, once these things are removed, something else comes in different. You know, once these things are removed, we begin to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies. Remember, our book says we're going to have a personality change sufficient to recover. And this personality change was going to develop slowly as a result of these steps. Already after step 4, we can see this personality change starting to develop right after step 4. Revolutionary change. The resentments is gone. Tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men. The opposite is coming in. Revolution means a complete turnaround. Already, we can see that. We have listed people we have hurt in by our conduct, are willing to straighten out the past. And if we have done this, we can see this is step 4. And we talked about the things in self that made up self. We talked about this in these are step 3. This is self. And over here, these things that we're going to talk about in 5, 6, 7. And we have made a list of the people we're going to hurt. Some of these people on this list are the people we offended. So we got 8 and 9 over here. We got 4 here. We got 3 here. We got 5, 6, and 7 here. And then we got 8 and 9 all on this sheet. If we have worked the inventory, like the big book says, we have all the information for steps 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 right on these 3 sheets. He said, in this book you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision, this is step 3, and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, and this is step 4. And remember it says grosser. I think everybody, this is all we have to do is start off is looking at our grosser handicaps. Yeah, we got other handicaps. We're going to be working on these for the rest of our life. But all we want to do is start on our grosser handicaps. I think the greatest difficulty with step 4 is most people are trying to wait till they get well and then take step 4. Now you take the step to get well. You don't wait till you get well to take the step. I mean, you just want to get the worst things, the grosser handicaps. That's all we got to do. You have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and ingested some big chunks of truth about yourself. So we have done step 4 as a big book. We have found out a lot about ourselves. For the first time, we've got a glimpse to this is our grosser handicaps. And also, we have learned a great process. Not only have we went through this and learned a lot about it, I learned something. I put something in my mind. I have learned in this process something that's been programmed into my mind. For the rest of my life, whenever a resentment comes up, by going through these sheets 3 times like this, going through the inventory process with 3 sheets, analyzing all these other things, every day in my life when something comes up, I say, all I got to do is say, oh, this is a resentment. what is the cause of it. Every day. You know, when it just as it comes up, I can immediately say, oh, I got a resentment. What's the cause of it? Which part of self did it hurt? Which character defect in me was out of whack? And I can immediately wipe it out. See, I don't have to go around replaying 20 years no more. I can get them as they come up. Step 4, not only analyze those of the past, but it gives me tools to get rid of all resentments on a daily basis, which we're talking to talk about in step 10 for the rest of my life. Now, we have completed step 4 at this point. We're ready to really now, as things move along at this point, because we've got the information for 5, 6, and 7. So next week, we'll start on to step 5, and we'll move right on through step 6 and 7. Tonight we are at step 5, in which we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Bill is, in his remarks on this step, said nothing works like step 5 in this deflation of the ego. And this is what this program is all about, to remove self. And when we get to 5, we do a little review each week, and we said the first step is the foundation of recovery. And basically, we know that in all problem solving as we go through this, is that it's a simple process. It's just a matter of finding out what is the problem. It's the first step in recovery from a problem. And if we don't find that, you know, just basically like we do, we go to the doctor, and the doctor makes a diagnosis to find out what is the problem. And if he can't find the problem, then you can't determine the solution. In fact, the solution is based on this information. So this is the foundation of everything we're going to do. What is the problem? And for many, many years, you know, as an alcoholic, I didn't know what my problem was. I thought it was money, so I pursued that. I thought it was family. I thought it was the town I was in, so I moved to another. But that wasn't the problem. When I got to another town, I still had the same problem, because my problem wasn't the town. And as we said, the first step is to see and understand the problem, and that's all the first step does. The first step says our problem is we're powerless. And that's easy enough. Powerless over alcohol in our lives have become unmanageable. And that's all wrapped up in as we go through and understand. This is just a problem statement. In order to understand that, we have to go into our book and examine the doctor's opinion that's in the big book there. We find the explanation of these steps. And in the big book he states, it was a doctor's opinion. He stated, this is my opinion of the problem. When Bill went to see Dr. Silkworth, and Dr. Silkworth sat down to Bill and explained to him the exact nature of his problem. And this is passed on to us. I think this is the freedom from a problem, is to when you understand it. When you understand it, then you can realize what you can do to solve it. And he explained to Bill that he had a twofold problem. Part of it was in his body. Part of our problem is in the body. We have a physical allergy to alcohol. You know, we are allergic to alcohol. And, you know, when I first come to AA, I couldn't understand why I was allergic to alcohol. I said, you know, when you're allergic to something, you break out in a rash. You know what I mean? Or you sneeze. But I never did break out in a rash, never did sneeze. And I just couldn't figure out how I could be allergic to alcohol. I was drinking 3 pints of it a day, you know. But we learned that it isn't a visual or physical manifestation. He said the craving of alcohol is the manifestation of the allergy. You know, and he said this never occurs in the average temperate drinker. And it was very simple, you know. Every time I took a drink, I craved a second drink, and a third drink, and a fourth drink, and a fifth drink. And the more I drank, the more I craved. And I would take that drink, and I would drink too much, and I would go through the well-known spree, and I ended up sick and in a lot of trouble. And when I got through with that, I would do like every alcoholic. I would repeat our national anthem. I will never do that again. Yeah. Because, you know, it's quite obvious, you know, that alcohol was causing me a problem. You know, in a way, alcohol was always did. I always did have a problem. But still yet, you know, that if that would be the only thing, I could have obviously said, well, I'll just leave that alone. It's obvious. It's like anything else. You know. But, you know, there was something else involved in this. This was a mental factor involved. If it had just been physical, I would have left it alone the first time and said, boy, I ain't going to do that no more. Probably, you know. Had about 45 years of sobriety by now. But what happened over here, I had the mind. You know, over in the mind. My main problem was in my mind, not the fact that I couldn't drink alcohol. And that got worse and worse and worse. But over here, he said I was restless and irritable and discontent. I had certain things within my makeup. Certain human factors that most people have, and loneliness, inadequate feelings, and these things would bother me. And once I began to learn, you know, once I began to take a few drinks of alcohol, I noticed that alcohol made me feel better. Alcohol changed the way I felt. Whether it was better, whether it got better or worse, it took me away from the point I was at. Alcohol took me away from there. And whatever it was, when I felt that way, I would realize that alcohol was my answer. My mind, once I learned to do this, my mind said, the doctor said I would remember the sense and ease and comfort would come at once by taking a few drinks of alcohol. When I had a feeling I didn't like, I would remember alcohol. And my mind would lead me over to take a few drinks of alcohol, which would take away my feelings. It would work. But it would also set off the craving in my body. And I would take the third drink and the fourth drink and the fifth drink and continue to drink and go through well-known spree, get in a lot of trouble down there on the bottom end. And I would emerge and repeat my national anthem. I will never do that again. And I would slowly build up with the mind, and this vicious cycle began to go over and over and over. And it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And it said the end result is this: insanity or death. Unless somewhere along the line we can see the exact nature of the problem. Because if we don't see the problem, we will carry it out to the bitter end. And most alcoholics today will never realize they're alcoholics. Most of them will go to insanity or death. But somewhere along the line, if you can see what's going on, see what the problem is, you can find a solution. And that's what the second step is, a solution. A solution to this problem is quite obvious. Like, you know, if you're powerless, the solution would be power. And we talked about the power in our program, the power of the fellowship, associating with other people like you. They have the same problem you got, understanding and information that they can do. We can look at these people and we can get some hope because they have recovered. We can look at these people and we can come to believe. If we can come to believe, then we can come to the second part of this power, the vital spiritual experience. We can come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And it's through going to the fellowship, seeing this in the flesh, hearing people, that we can pursue the ultimate solution, a power greater than ourselves. And we see, you know, that the solution is we believe that this power can work within the mind, not the body. And therefore came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, could make us whole. So we have the first step, we see the problem, and the second step, we see the solution, and then we have these. This is the foundation. You know, we know exactly where we stand, and we know exactly where we want to go. This is our goal. Then the other steps, the main purpose then is to go from here to here. And we have a series of steps, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. These steps will enable us to find a power greater than ourselves which will solve our problem. So this is the journey that we're on. The main thing is this journey. But we can't really plan this until we have the foundation, these two things, where we are and where we want to go. Then we can figure out how to get there. Now the first step in this journey is a decision. That's the first step in any journey. You know, if you're going to California, your first step to get there is when you decide to go. You got to make a decision. You know? Now, the decision precedes all action. And decision is based on fact. Decision means to cut facts in two. Choose a course of action. And if you're an alcoholic, you have the first two steps have given you two facts. One fact is that you're powerless, and the other fact, there is a power. Okay? And it asks you to decide. This decision, cut in two. You choose a course of action. If you're an alcoholic, and with honesty, you don't have but two courses of action. You know, when I was moving to California, that wasn't a fact. That was fiction. You know what I mean? When I did all those other things, it didn't improve the problem, because that isn't what the problem was. Where I was had nothing to do with it. But once I got down here, we stand at a turning point. For the first time, I got a chance to turn this thing around. Because AA has given me two facts. If you're an alcoholic, our book says over and over, the only thing you can do is continue as you are, insanity or death, or life on a spiritual basis. You know, he said you may be suffering from an illness over here that only a spiritual experience will conquer. So once we stand at the turning point and we see these two facts, it's not a hard decision. You know, people say, well, I had a hard time making it. They really, you know. That's just like I knew a guy some years ago come over and told me, he said, you know, I decided to come up here and get in the program. I said, you did? Yeah. He said, I went down to the judge and he told me he was going to get me 6 months in jail or I could go to meetings. And he said, I decided to go to meetings. Well, he really didn't have no decision, you know. He thought he had a decision, you know. And that's really where we are. You know, we don't have, but I think we take this road, we choose the power of backing away from this. So the first step is we make a decision. And once we make this decision, just like all decisions, you can't get to California on the decision. You know? The decision is no better than the actions that follow. So we make a decision to turn our will and our lives to the care of God. That's all we do in step 3. Now, how do we go about doing this? This is where we're coming in. You know, we have to go, if we want to turn our will and our lives to the care of God, we have to go to work to remove some things that block us off from God. And to do that, we have to identify what these things are. So we begin in step 4, the inventory process, to look within ourselves, to look at the stock in trade, the things that within us that block us off from God. And we went through and we made a list of these things with the inventory process. We listed these things. Not only did we list them, we listed them and analyzed them. You know, we went through 3 areas of our grosser handicaps, which I mentioned in the big book. And we talked about, we put our resentments down. And resentments do block us from God, because there's no way that God can enter and direct a mind that's full of resentments. And we alcoholics just, he said, this is our number one offender. We enjoy resentments. We like to resent other people But mainly we would like to resent ourselves. We love to feel sorry for ourselves, and we pass our days sitting around feeling sorry for ourselves. And so we put these things down and we list these resentments, and then we put down the cause of each resentment beside it. After we went from top to bottom listing the resentments, then we listed the causes. And thirdly, we put down which part of self was threatened. We can't have a resentment unless some part of self is threatened. Self is the root of all human problems. So we got that down and we was able to read it across and analyze it. In the fourth column, we went through and put down, what defective character was involved. And for the first time, we got a true picture of our resentments. So we went through fear. We went through our sex life. And we put these things down now. We can list them and analyze them. And for the first time, we're getting a little glimpse of ourselves. And I think, as we go through the inventory, we are, most of us are shocked, but most of us are going to find out we're humans. We're not God. We're just human beings with all of the frailties of all humans. Now that we see this, I think step 4, this is why we have step 5. That's why 5 comes after 4. It would be very damaging to see these things and to walk in the light of the understanding of ourselves and stay right at step 4. So that's why step 5 comes immediately behind, where we can bring these things out in the light of day. Because if they were to go back, we might be worse than we were. Our book says there are many reasons for taking step 5, and I love the subtlety, and then maybe in a little humor, as Bill writes in the book, there are many reasons for taking step 5, but the best reason is you might get drunk if you don't. Well, that's a pretty good reason. Now, it talks about, for the first time, all these other steps have been done really in the quietness of our mind, except for a little paper, the inventory process. These things have been done, we haven't went beyond ourselves. We looked at this information. We took step. Only on an individual basis can we take step 1. And only on an individual basis can we do step 2. And only we can make this decision. And only we can take this inner look at ourselves. So really these things have been done within our minds and within ourselves. But now comes step 5, and maybe for the first time we got to go beyond ourselves. No, you can't do step 5. Step 5 says to God and to ourselves and to another human being. And we said in our book, as we go through this, we talk about our book gives us a design of human life. And we say there are 3 dimensions. We have a spiritual life, and we have a mental life, and we have a physiological, sociological life. And our book says, number 1, we talk it over with God. That's the center of all human life. Deep down, every man, that's the core of life. And that, he said, we start in here, and alcoholism is an inside job. It really is. It's an inside job. A lot of professional people, a lot of times people that want to work with alcoholics, they tell the alcoholic, well, what you need to do is straighten up this circle out here. You know what I mean? And if you can straighten up your life and straighten up your family and do all this, then you'll be all right. You won't have to quit drinking. And that's what I tried that many, many years. Outside circle is made up of a lot of things. My job's out there. My wife's out there. My money's out there. You know what I mean? All my whole life is in that outside circle. My relationship with people. That's sociological. That's the biggest part of my life. I make money with people. My family's people. Everything's out there. And that circle was gone to hell. I worked on it for years. I'd get some money. I'd be out of money. I'd go get some money. I'd get the money back and the wife would be gone. I'd get the wife back and the car would be gone. I'd get the car back and they'd cut the lights off. Boy, hell, you know what I mean? We can't never, we're just chasing rainbows, you know what I mean? He says, build your house on a firm foundation. You know what I mean? Yeah, start inside. And so, you know, we can see this design. It's a design for living. We can start now here at step 5. He says, we talk to God about it first. That comes first. And then we talked about ourselves. You know what I mean? Talk to ourselves about it. And then we share it with another human being. So we can see, you know, for the first time, and this is very difficult for we alcoholics don't live in this way. See, an alcoholic, first thing he cusses, he's already sick in the way back before I even took a drink. I was on self in here, right? And when you're on self in here, it gets kind of painful in the head. And when it gets painful in the head, you have problems with people. See me? So that's easy enough. You put booze in here, that takes care of the middle. And then run these people off. So we admit to God, to ourselves, another human being, the exact nature of our wrong. And I think, you know, we have to talk about some words here and get maybe some broader concept of words. You know, we always hone in on that word wrongs. Well, you tell an alcoholic about, you know, immediately we get all out of shape when we say the exact nature of our wrongs. Well, wrongs, if we look up the word wrongs or look at the broadest interpretation of really what the word really means, we usually think about things we did wrong, wrong actions. But also there is some other wrongs. You know, wrong thinking, wrong judgment, right? Wrong believing, and then wrong actions. Remember in step 3 we made a decision to turn over our thinking and our actions. We have wrong actions. But the exact nature of our wrongs is wrong thinking and wrong believing. These are the things that brings on the wrong actions. You know, we have resentments, which is wrong judgment. And if we went through and this is why it's so important to step 4, if we have went through our inventory and listed and analyzed these things, we have seen the value of really resentments. We have seen how we have judged people wrongly. We will see how we have judged people and put the blame on them with our resentments to excuse our involvement in that thing. But now that we see the truth, you know, the truth sets us free. And we see got wrong believing. We alcoholics, we're full of fear. We have listed and analyzed those wrong believings. You know, we alcoholics we don't know what's going to happen, but we know it's going to be bad. Yeah. If all the things ever happened to me that I believe was going to happen to me, a insurance company never would carry me. Boy, I mean, I always believed some bad thing was going to happen to me. None of them never happened, but I didn't realize, I couldn't tell myself that. See me? Because I couldn't see the truth. I could only see the lie. I really believed that all these things were going to happen. So fear is wrong believing. And then we also listed in our resentments, you know, the harms done to others. So these are the things we're going to talk about. Not what we not the things we did wrong, but the exact nature of our wrongs. And if we have done the inventory as the big book has laid out in detail, then we have the information to share with another human being. You know, we alcoholics have cut ourselves off from people, and you know, and I think we live in a very lonely way. And just coming back to in 12 and 12, Bill says getting in with Alcoholics Anonymous, getting with other people breaks down some of this. You know, but it's still, you know, it doesn't give us the intimacy, or does it give us the completeness or being back until we're really able to admit these things and to share with another human being and become a part of life. You know, this is why we feel isolated. And nothing breaks down this isolation any better than step 5, when we reveal something of our inner lives and open ourselves up with other people for the first time. And we won't never know. That's one thing about these steps. You will never know the results of them until you do them. They don't give you the results before. The results comes after the step. So we begin, and then we talk to God about the exact nature of our wrong. And if we have done the inventory thoroughly, we have this information. And we have the exact nature of our wrong. You know, they say confession is good, and there's nothing new about confession. But this in itself is not really a confession. It's more or less a thorough discussion. And I think you know that as we get these things down on our list, we're going to say that this was a resentment, this was a cause, this part of self was involved. And we can only put these things down as we see them. You know, and we alcoholics, you know, our book talks so beautifully about this. In order to be an alcoholic, you have to be a con artist. You really do. It's come natural with the disease. It goes with the disease. And the person you really have to con is yourself. See, there is no way that we could live with ourselves unless we conned ourselves. You know, we have to lie to ourselves. And it becomes natural. You know what I mean? Alcoholic does that. He just lies natural to himself. See, we get up in the morning, we go to work, and we're damn near dead when we get out of bed. You know how we feel? Ain't been in there that long. And we're sick, and we're in bad shape, we drag ourselves out of bed, and we stick that toothbrush in our mouth, and that's bad news, you know. And maybe we could eat some breakfast, a piece of toast, and throw some coffee down. And we jump in the car somewhere, we get to work. And when we get there, we're sicker than most people out here in the hospital. You know, most people are sick as we are in the recovery room out there. And we're damn near dead. And the boss says, "How you doing this morning?" "Fine, fine, fine." Well, it's a funny thing. You know, I go down in detox ward down at the Benton unit all the time. You walk in there, and everybody in there inquires about your health. They say, "How you doing, Joe?" I say, "I'm fine. How you doing?" "You're the one." "I'm fine." Guy just saved his life last night, and he wanted to know how I'm doing. Okay, so how can we really, even though it says, and we have taken, no, we put down the truth as we saw it. The truth as we saw it. But that's very, very important. But a lot of times, you know, I really say to myself, I'm truthful. But even yet today, I'm truthful as I see it. As I see it. But as I see it, the truth, is that really the truth? I only can see the truth through my eyes. And none of us can be 100% honest with ourselves. And we never have been all our lives. So we did the best we could with this inventory. And this is why step 5 is so important. Step 5 is to go out and to improve on that information. We got the problem down as we see it. Now we take to another person, to God and to another person, and get more to the exact nature of the problem, of the wrong. You know, he's going to look at these things. He'll look at some of these resentments. And he'll look at the cause. And he said, which part of self was threatened? You know, chances are, sometimes he's going to say, well, I believe this was different. You know, probably going to say, well, this was caused by selfishness. He said, no, this was this damn dishonesty that caused this. You know what I mean? He's going to tell you, he's going to move some of those things. He's going to improve on the inventory. Step 5 is a process of improving on the information in the inventory. You know, because we cannot see Even yet today, I can't see the truth in my life. I think none of us would ever be noticed a total truth. This is why we have to keep these doors open with other people. So, we begin this process, and he says, many people have failed because they did this, but they took stock. They thought they had lost the egotism and fear, and they only thought they had humbled themselves. This is a very humbling step. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. We alcoholics, he said, we do lead a double life. He talks about how we play our lives on the stage, and we want a character that we know we don't really deserve. And sometimes we play those games, and I think most of us get playing those games for other people, and we play that role over and over and over for other people, and finally somewhere along the line we lose all identity of what we really are. And this is why it's all about learning who we are. But we've been playing, get one role for this guy, one role for this guy, one role for her, one role for her, and we don't know what our role really was. You see some of them people, you say, well, what did I play for her the last time I saw her? And we lose all identity. So we begin here in this process of doing this, and he tells us how to do this. Our book is very simple. Number one, we talk to God about it, and I think this is in the start and the middle. God, this is easy enough to know. This is great. He already knows it anyway. And I think he just wanted to hear us say it out loud so he knows that we'll know it. That's all it is. He already knows. There's no new information, but he, hearing us say it, knows that for the first time we see the light, that we begin to see these things. And this maybe, is our first communication, and it's very difficult. Maybe having just made contact with God. Maybe it's our first time and sit down and I think a lot of times, most time we have trouble with step 5. People are constantly staring at the last part, another human being. And I think if we would work it, the step is talk to God about it first. Talk to God about it. Whatever our conception or understanding at this point is very simple. But just talk to God as we understand Him about what we have saw in our inventory. So first time, I think that we can see that we're not bad people. We're just sick people trying to get well. We're not bad people trying to get good. Biggest thing wrong with just like really most people. They're all good people. They just got some things out of the wrong place. And our book talks about rearrangements and some adjustments. We got some of the things that belong over here, and some over here. Everything's out of whack. And we're going to get rid of anything. We're going to put some things back in order. And so we begin, and we talk to God about it. And then next we talk to ourselves about it. And boy, it's a great, I think that I heard a guy say one of the greatest meetings that anybody ever has in his life, and I think that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is all about, enables us to do. And some people never have it. One of the greatest meetings you're going to ever attend is that one big meeting you're going to have with yourself. Boy, that's, I never want to meet myself. I used to walk in the bathroom somewhere and I'd try to shave, turning away from the mirror. And every once in a while, regardless to what we do, we're naturally human beings, and our minds turn on ourselves. Our minds turn inward into our life occasionally. And all the alcohol and all the confusion. Every once in a while, we alcoholics have a little glimpse of ourselves. And it's scary. Remember sometime at a bar, or sometime getting out of bed, or many, many times during my life with alcohol, my mind would reflect back on me. And I would start looking at me. And boy, I'd say, boy, let's get a drink and get our minds off of that. Don't think about that. That's natural. We run from ourselves, hide from ourselves. And for the first time in our life, after admitting to God, after we'll be able to face ourselves. After. Through the grace of God. And I think this is great. I mean, boy, this meeting began for me many years ago. And I have some good meetings with me. Boy, I have many hours in the last 20-some years. I have had many hours with me. And it's the most enjoyable thing in the world is to be with yourself. It's great. And we argue sometimes. We have some great conversations. I wonder if I drive down the street and I see people looking at me and I don't know, we'll just have some good conversations. But it's great to have a meeting with yourself. And then after we accomplish this, then it talks about another person. You know, for the first time, this is. But if we have overcome these first two hurdles, we're prepared for this. We can see how the intensity builds and why it's so difficult just to avoid these things and try to do. We can't work the step that way. But once we have done these things, then we can come to another human being. And I think for the first time in our lives, and our book is very complete. It tells us how to do all this. It tells us exactly how to do this step. You know, it says we got the inventory. It tells us even how to select the person to take the inventory away. It's no problem today because there are many people in the fellowship around Alcoholics Anonymous who have been through the same things you've been through. If you're new here tonight, you know, you're not going to tell them anything that's going to excite them. Hey, the only thing you're going to talk about the exact nature of your problem. He's not interested in what you did wrong. You know, you could talk forever about what you did wrong, and it isn't of any great value. And I think with too much time, we concentrate on what I did wrong. What I did wrong. I want to tell you and confess. Well, that has some cleansing effect. But if you don't talk about and learn what sort of thinking caused you to do that, you're going to be down there with a new batch of them next week. You have to get down to the exact cause of the wrong. And these are the things we saw in the inventory. This is why the inventory has to be correct, or else you can't do nothing in step 5 but talk about what you did wrong. You get a cleansing effect, but we got to see the exact nature. Now, once we see this, our book tells us how to select someone, and our book was complete, and I love the big book. And it's so easy to take our steps with the book. On page 74 of the book, it tells us how to do everything, how to select someone to take this with. Of course, it is not a problem because we have plenty of sponsors. We have plenty of people, knowledgeable people around now here at this time in 1987. But remember, in 1939, there wasn't anybody around. Someone in New York wrote the book and sent it here to Little Rock. And the guy here in Little Rock, he didn't say, go talk to your sponsor, because there wasn't any sponsors here. And it had to be a complete book. It had to inform the guy how to handle everything. So I told him how to find someone to take step 5. And the book is still in its original form, hadn't been changed. And I love this section of the book. Right there, naturally, we think before we choose a person to whom we think take this intimate and confidential step. Now it says, those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, of course, want to go to a proper point of authority. You know, if you belong to that religion, then you take that route. He said, though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk to someone in ordained religion, established religion. And we often find such people quick to see and understand our problems. That's true. And, of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand the alcoholic. Okay, he's given us certain suggestions. Now, he said if we cannot do this, we may search out an acquaintance or a close-mouthed friend. Boy, that close-mouthed, understanding friend. Now, you know, in 1939, this is what you had to do. Probably go to work and find some guy you work with and say, hey, man, I want to take step 5 with you. Over on page 75, he begins to tell us, he said, when we have decided who is to hear our story, you know, when we have decided this, and we got a sponsor, it's very simple, it's very easy what we do. He says, we have a written inventory. We have these sheets all filled out. We have the information. And this is as we see it. And we go to this person, and he goes over these things. In great detail, he goes over the first resentment. You know. And he's not involved in this resentment. Remember, he wasn't there. You know. He can see the truth about it. He can see the exact nature of it. And as he goes through these inventories and reads each one across, and he looks at the resentment, and looks at the cause, he looks which for himself is involved, and he looks at the character defect involved, he's going to check those out and see if he agrees with it as you agree with them. And if there's something there that he sees different, he's going to talk these things over with you and improve on your inventory. And as he goes through these things in a very detailed way, discussing with you, the chances are he's going to share also a little bit of himself and how he had problems and how he had similar things in his life. And as you go through these things, you'll find the loneliness begin to vanish in your life. You find out you're not unique. You find out, that you're a part of things. And you also, you will feel renewed in the fact that you can handle these things. You will feel renewed in the fact that you will be able to let go of them because you have seen the damage and effect of them when you get to step 6. So he says we explain upon what we have to do and why we have to do it. He said most people approach this way would be glad to help. They would be honored by our confidence. We pocket our pride and go to illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Now we talk about every twist of character. We talk about our selfishness, our dishonesty, our self-seeking, our inconsideration, and how these things and the things they caused in our lives. The pain and the wrongs they caused in other people's lives. We talk about these things. Our resentments go all the way back through our lives. I didn't have my resentments didn't come from yesterday. Some of them come from 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, all the way back to the beginning. Like the guy said, when that doctor picked me up and spanked me, I've resented him ever since then. I resented people that was dead. I just resented, all through my life. So it was all the way back through my life, these resentments. So we went through these things, we discussed these things. He says, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. Step 5 is a very rewarding step. If we look at the steps up to this point, we look at step 1, because you don't get anything for step 1. That's just seeing the problem. There's no improvement in saying, well, that's the problem. There's no improvement in determining the solution. You don't feel any better when you get the prescription. All the improvement begins with the action steps. And step 3 is just a decision. They're not allowed. It's a decision to take some action. But step 3 says it's just a beginning. Sometimes the effect is felt at once, but most time it's just a beginning. So you don't get a lot out of step 3. And step 4 is not real action. It's sitting down and identify the things to act on. But step 5 really is the first step of action. For the first time, we have gone beyond our own minds. We had to go outside of ourselves. And of all the steps that we have taken, there is more rewards from step 5 than all the 4 steps before it. We get more out of step 5. It's the first step of some real results. And it says, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Now we have met ourselves. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs. You know, at step 2, we came to believe, and that's all we've been traveling on, up to step 5. But now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Step 5 is the beginning of the spiritual experience. Not step 3, where we just made a decision. But once we have put up some action, the first step of real action, this is the beginning of the spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem had disappeared would often come strongly. Sometimes after step 5, you know, for the first time, you know, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We feel we're on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. For the first time, you know, we get some confidence, you know, we know that things are beginning to happen after step 5. Yeah, most people take step 3 and wait for this to happen. The first step, and that's waiting for all these things. You know, you can study the program and you study the steps, and they will tell you where you are and when you're going to get it. After each step, it will give you the results. Now, after you take these steps, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're pretty hard steps, and you wore out by now. And I love the big book. Is the first time you have a little rest is after step 5. You need to pause a little bit, because you're pretty wore out if you took these first 5 steps. He said, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. And I love that. He did say an hour. He didn't say 3 weeks, did he? Careful reviewing. Sit down, carefully reviewing what we have done. You know, let's look at these steps. We thank God from the bottom of our heart. We know Him better. You know, at step 2, we just believed. But already we know God better than we did when we started. You know, we're not spiritual giants. Never will be, but we know Him better. Okay. Taking the book down from the shelf, we turn to the pages which contains the 12 steps. We go to the page that contains these 12 steps we're trying to work. Carefully reviewing the first 5 proposals. We're going to look at the first 5 steps. We ask if we omitted anything. For we are building an arch to which we shall walk a free man at last. As our work solid so far, the stones properly in place. Have we skimped on the cement, putting the foundation? Have we tried to make more without sand? You know, we go back and look at those first 5 steps. And you know, as he begins to draw, and as we said, the book is drawing pictures in our minds. You know, he says, remember, as we begin, he said, this new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. And he's building this arch. You know, he's drawing pictures in our minds. And he's talking about this arch. We're going to go through this gate to freedom. And you know, as we talked about how they built these arches, we said that step 3 was the keystone. You know, he said willingness was the foundation. He says step 2 was the cornerstone. Step 1 is the foundation. So we got 1, 2, and 3 in here. And this stone here is what's the keystone, the new and triumphant arch to which we pass to freedom. So we had those stones in there, and now we have put in step 4 and maybe probably step 5. So we got these in place. We're building an arch through which we're going to go to the freedom. And he says, we look at this thing, and I think, you know, he says that he associates this arch, paralleling the arch, with a spiritual experience. And we can see it developing in our lives. And this is the gate through it. The spiritual experience is the gateway to freedom. And he parallels it with this design. And as we begin to put these stones, he says we stop at step 5 and review and see if these things are properly in place. See if we have done these thoroughly. And he said if we can answer to our satisfaction, then we can go into step 6. But this is the foundation of our recovery. And we'll just begin. We're on our road. And I think, you know, as we begin to step 4 and 5 is a real pinnacle. Because the real success of the rest of the program lies in steps 4 and step 5. It's the information that we have gathered in step 4 and the improvement on this information that allows us to be willing now in step 6. If we have seen how damaging these things and destructive these things to our lives and the problems they have caused, then surely step 6, which must become willing to have them removed, this was very simple and very easy. You know, willing to let go of them in step 6. And then in 7, we're going to ask God to remove them. This is a very simple process. If we have done the job thoroughly in step 4 and step 5. And if we haven't done the job thoroughly in step 4 and step 5, then we need to do that. Because then steps 6, 7, 8, and 9, and the rest of the steps become quite simple based on the efforts we put in step 3, 4, and 5. If those are complete, then we can look at step 6. And next week we'll go in to step 6.